Hey everybody, let's talk about ghosting. Now here's an article that appeared on LinkedIn recently called Ghosting Needs to Disappear. And this is a very short article, it's only this paragraph, but it talks about how bad ghosting is and how unprofessional it is. And it has a response from people that seem like they're in a permanent state of outrage where they just amplify this. Now, this is a very general article, quote unquote, but I'd like to talk about ghosting in the context of job search. Okay, if you're a candidate, you have applied for jobs and you've been ghosted by a recruiter or a hiring manager, this is what I want to talk about because I've received this question many times over from people looking for jobs that have applied for posted jobs, and they've encountered this, and quite frankly, they're feeling a lot of anxiety and they're feeling a lot of confusion, and it's a real shot to their ego, and they don't understand what's going on. And quite frankly, I don't blame them. Okay? Now, I'm assuming everybody knows what ghosting is. That's when you're communicating with somebody and then all of a sudden they drop off the face of the planet. They stop talking to you. Okay? And in the context of job search, this is actually an increasingly common situation. Okay? In the last 20 years, the trend has been for ghosting to only increase. It's only getting more prevalent, okay? And like this article says, it needs to disappear. Well, I agree. It would be wonderful if everybody conducted themselves in a professional way and they engaged in proper, professional, courteous business communication. But unfortunately, we're seeing quite the opposite. The trend is that this is only going to increase, okay? So I find that it helps to deal with this if we can understand it for what it is, okay? So I would like to talk about this, and I'd like to talk about what I think is a more interesting question, rather than just being, sort of permanently outraged that this occurs. I'd like to talk about why it's occurring in the first place, because people are going to be dealing with this even more in the future, and it's not going away anytime soon, in my opinion, okay? So first of all, let's get the obvious out of the way. Ghosting is bad, it's unprofessional, and the people who are ghosted feel disrespected and they feel stress and anxiety because of it, okay? It is a bad thing. Professional people don't do this. However, we are seeing it a lot, okay? Now, the reason why recruiters in particular, recruiters and hiring managers, the reason why they ghost candidates is twofold. Okay, there's two main reasons why people actually do this. Okay, and it's very important for candidates to understand, because once you understand why they're doing this, hopefully it helps you understand it for what it is and not get as stressed out about it, and not get as and not feel as disrespected as people feel when this happens. And I don't blame you. When I get ghosted, and when I used to get ghosted, I felt disrespected, I felt really angry, and I felt confused, and I think that's typical. The number one reason why recruiters ghost people is, first of all, to save themselves work and effort, save themselves time and effort. Let me give you the example, which is quite a common occurrence, is a recruiter who has contacted approximately 25 candidates to possibly bring in for an interview, okay? A lot of jobs, especially posted jobs, they're going to be getting around 100 applicants, sometimes more. And a recruiter will consider, usually in the area of about 25 of those candidates, and consider bringing them, shortlist them to bring them in for an interview, okay? Now, you can imagine that if you are considering, let's say, 25 candidates, 24 of those candidates, probably you will have to deliver bad news to them and tell them that either they were not selected for an interview, or they, even though they did the interview, they did not get the job. Okay? Now, think of yourself. How long would it take you to write 24 emails or make 24 phone calls, even if, say, the emails or the phone calls, they're based off a template, okay? You're changing an email address and a name and possibly some details. Okay, even if that's all you were doing, how long would that take you to do? I'd say maybe an hour, somewhere in there, to send 24, 25 emails. what recruiters are finding is that, first of all, they're increasingly being put in a situation where they're asked to do more with less. So they're not just recruiting for one job, they're recruiting for several positions, and you'd have to do this with each position that you're recruiting for. So you're basically multiplying your work by 24, okay, by communicating with 24 candidates, okay? Now, if there's a negative outcome, or you're delivering bad news to those people, you're having to multiply your work by 24, okay? And what recruiters are finding is that, first of all, ghosting saves you all that work, and secondly, you're not seeing a comparable downside to avoiding all that work. You're not seeing any real consequences to that. You're not having candidates show up at your office in an outrage. You're not seeing a reduction in applicants for the jobs you're posting, and you're not seeing the successful candidates refuse to accept the job or demand more money because you have been ghosting their competition, the other candidates. So you're really not seeing too much of a downside, at least directly, when they engage in this activity. So it saves them time. They don't see a downside. That's the number one reason why recruiters and hiring managers are doing this, okay? The second reason has to do with a lot of recruiters and hiring managers shying away from delivering bad news, okay? Now, I'm not judging these people too harshly, because in some situations, in some circumstances, this can be understood. I'm not condoning it, but I think it can be understood, okay? Telling many people every day that they did not get the job and having them react to you, and in some cases blame you, target their frustration and anger towards you, is a very stress-inducing, anxiety-inducing occupation. And quite frankly, a lot of recruitment and selection positions, a lot of them are sort of entry-level pay grade, and that just isn't really justified. The nature of the job is that you might celebrate with one candidate, and they may get the job, but for every one candidate that gets the job, many others don't. And if you have to deal with that, with the anger and the frustration and the awkwardness head on constantly, that makes an extremely demanding job even more unbearable. Okay. Now, I'm not condoning ghosting. I'm just saying that I think we can understand it when we consider that aspect of it. Secondly, the other kind of part of this is that a lot of recruiters and hiring managers, not all of them, but a lot, quite frankly, are not very good at delivering bad news, and they tend to not do it in a very constructive way, or a way that reduces negative feelings for both parties. Okay. And that's one reason why they, instead of delivering bad news, they simply stop communicating, okay? And once again, you can understand this behavior by looking at their incentive structure. I mean, on the one hand, they're avoiding, a very negative situation. They're avoiding themselves a lot of stress, anxiety, and unpleasantness. And so the incentive structure there also points to ghosting being more beneficial to the recruiter or hiring manager than the alternative, right? So it's for these two reasons. The incentives all point to ghosting being a thing, and that's why it's so prevalent. The other thing is that, how can I put this? I'm a technical person, and in my career, I had to learn this stuff the hard way. There are certain expressions that you use in business. I don't know if this applies to all personal communication, but it's certainly in business, that are sort of trigger phrases. Like, for example, let's keep in touch. When you hear let's keep in touch, usually that signals I have no intention of keeping in touch with you. We're probably never going to communicate again. That's what that means. Another one is I'll get back to you. Right? The majority of times that somebody says that to you, I'll get back to you, it's almost like a word code that really means the exact opposite. It means like, well, I probably won't get back to you, right? So these are things that usually you learn through experience. I'm not justifying any of these. I think it's idiotic that this is the behavior, the social behavior that we see. But this is the reality. And knowing these quirks of professional human behavior in business circles can help understand it and can help people deal with it and manage it. Okay, that's why I'm making this video. Not to justify this kind of behavior, because it's very unprofessional, and I take great pride on not ghosting anybody that I'm in a business relationship with, because I myself have been ghosted. I know how most people, especially when they're younger, don't understand this behavior, and it leads to outrage and all kinds of feelings that are exhibited in this article, with people going on at length about it, right? Now, maybe one day we will get to this wonderful world where ghosting will disappear and it will not be a thing that people commonly encounter, especially in a job search type situation. However, unfortunately, my prediction is that this will only gain even more prevalence. And for that reason, people need to understand it for what it is. If you've been ghosted, don't stress out about it. I know it's easier said than done, but it's not meant, in the vast majority of cases, it's not meant to be a sign of disrespect. It is simply a way for recruiters to save themselves extra work and possibly an awkward situation. And just to wrap this up, I will say one further thing. The other element here is that something that not many people talk about when we discuss topics like this, okay, the sort of elephant in the room, is that if you tell a candidate that they didn't get the job or they didn't get called in for an interview, a very natural counter question is, why not? What did I do wrong? What could I do to improve on my performance in my next job interview? Okay, this is a very natural counter question. Okay, now that first of all necessitates even more communication back from the recruiter. They either have to address the question and say, well, here's why you didn't get selected, or they have to politely decline to give any further information, which can in itself exacerbate the problem. You know, where basically you're telling somebody, nope, we didn't select you, and we're not going to tell you why. So that reaction doesn't tend to go over very well with candidates anyway. So it's almost like a no-win situation from the perspective of the recruiter. And the reality is that even if they want to disclose and give full and complete information why you did not get selected, okay, they can't, because that would be revealing their hand. Even if they knew the exact reason why a candidate was not selected, they can't say it. Because if that information was released into the wild, it would allow future candidates to game the system. Okay? This is probably a topic for another video because it's actually quite in depth. But this is something that not many people talk about. Okay? And that is the reason why in the vast majority of situations, no recruiter will give full and complete information anyway. So rather than have to explain all of this to a candidate one at a time, to each candidate, you can understand why they choose to shy away from the entire issue and just stop responding. It's unfortunate, but these are some of the mechanisms that are going on behind the scenes. So hopefully that makes sense. If you've been ghosted, try not to stress out about it. It is not a shot at you. It is not a sign of disrespect. It is simply the avoidance, sometimes to a cowardly degree, of addressing some of these issues on the part of the recruiter. So hopefully that makes sense. Thank you very much for listening. You guys are all awesome, especially if you've been ghosted. I truly feel your pain. It's not a fun experience at all. I wish you nothing but the best. Thank you for listening this long. You guys are awesome. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, The Company's Expert 2, which is my commentary channel. And if you actually want to see my face, and let's face it, who wouldn't? I'm quite an attractive human being. Check out my main channel, The Company's Expert, link below. Thank you very much. Have yourselves a great day.